I figured we could go ahead and kick it off, give a brief introduction, and then hopefully some folks will join us in a few minutes. So for folks watching and those interested in attending, we do have a link to the actual Zoom on the Wasco County Planning page. If you navigate to long range projects and then NSA Ludo and map updates, you can find a link to participate in Zoom. But if you're watching on Facebook, feel free to underneath where our live stream is, post any questions or comments that you have about the upcoming changes. So we've scheduled this meeting primarily to talk about some proposed amendments that we're bringing before the Planning Commission on May 14th to update the National Scenic Area Land Use and Development Ordinance. It's mostly housekeeping tasks, but Alice is going to do some overview about what you can expect from those updates. And then I'm also on hand. My name is Kelly. I'm the Wasco County Planning Director, on hand to answer any questions that you have about a recent postcard notice that you got about some land use designation map updates in the National Scenic Area. So we're really going to be focused on those two topics tonight, but we welcome any comments or questions. Alice is our long-range special projects planner, and she's really been the force behind developing and working on the National Scenic Area Land Use and Development Ordinance update. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Alice for opening remarks, or to go ahead and kick off the presentation.
Hi, good evening. Thank you, Kelly. Good evening. I have a short PowerPoint presentation and then an opportunity to answer any questions you have. So I will go ahead now and share my screen and get started. So as Kelly had introduced, we are proposing a package of amendments to our National Scenic Area Land Use and Development Ordinance. In Wasco County, we have two land use and development ordinances. One is for the portion of the county that is outside the National Scenic Area. And then this one, which is what we call the NSA Ludo, if we use all the acronyms. And this is for lands that are inside that National Columbia River Gorge National Scenic Area. And as you may know, lands inside the National Scenic Area since the early 90s have been, all the counties in the National Scenic Area have had to comply, have had to bring our own regulations into compliance with the National Scenic Area rules. And the rules are really called what's called the National Scenic Area Master Plan, or Management Plan, I should say. So periodically we are required to bring our Ludo into compliance with that document. And I'll move to the next slide. The last major amendment to the NSA Ludo was in 2021 when the Columbia River Gorge Commission proposed a large group of changes to their management plan. They passed those, and then they passed on the requirement to all the counties to update our Ludos in a major way. And so that last large amendment took about, I don't know, a year to 18 months, maybe 2 years of time that was rolled out to the county property owners, and there was some public outreach associated with it. That last update happened in 2021. This time, this is several what we call housekeeping issues. It's not major like that. And we're just, I would call these amendments where we're trying to catch up with some of the rules that are already in place. So I'm going to share a few slides that give some examples of some things we're doing with this package of amendments. One example, for instance, we're adding and just cleaning up our code. We missed some ordinance adoption dates, for instance. That's helpful for those that are doing research and need that information. We have to improve the readability of our code. We have added some cross-references or citations. So when a code section might reference another code section, we're adding that citation into it so that it's easier for that reader to reference that code section quickly. We've replaced there's a term that I'll give you this next example. There's a defined term in our floodplain regulations that we did not use an acronym for. And it's called the area of special flood hazard. So that was spelled out, I don't know, maybe 100 times in the code there. We replaced that in several places with the acronym ASFH. So that was an area where we just streamlined the code a little bit. Of course, defining it in its first citation, as is common in a lot of documents. We had one instance where we didn't have gender neutral language. There was a reference in one section of this code that referred to the Planning Commission chairman. We replaced that language with Planning Commission chair, for instance. And then just, as I mentioned earlier, those citations, we also clarified process requirements. We might say, for instance, a variance is required. Well, we add the citation that says to be found in this section, just again, to make it easier to read. A major change in this NSA Ludo, and this requirement has already been implemented in the Wasco County Land Use and Development Ordinance, and that is to amend our code to recognize a hearings officer as an authorized review authority to preside over land use hearings. So there are some applications for land use actions that require a hearing. And today, those go before a citizen planning commission, and that's composed of, I believe, 7 members. And the proposal, and actually we're already implementing it in the other part of the county, is to use a hearings officer. And some of the benefits to doing that, one is we'll have a professional, a trained professional who's trained in land use law presiding over those hearings. What that does is it helps set up some consistency for the land use decisions and helps reduce litigation risk for the county. And then the other thing I think that's a real benefit to our customers is, rather than trying to schedule a meeting around the schedule of 7 members, we just have to schedule it around our hearings officer's schedule. We don't have hearings every month, for instance. We schedule them on an as-needed basis. And this will be much, we believe, more efficient to schedule these for our customers. Let me move on to the next one here. I just talked a lot about the fact that our NSA Ludo needs to be consistent with the Columbia River Gorge management plan, National Scenic Area Management Plan. So we added and deleted quite a bit of language. Some of these comments, we've reached out now twice to the staff at the Columbia River Gorge Commission with this package of amendments. They suggested even more amendments, areas where our current code is not consistent with the management plan. So we've taken all those, and we hope that at the end of this, we'll have a fully compliant code that has every bit of it is in compliance with the Columbia River Gorge Mission Management Plan. As you might imagine, when those rules are updated every few years, it does require a lot of language changes. So it is easy to miss a few things along the way, and we've caught a few of those, and that's part of this housekeeping amendment. And second, the next group of amendments are those to bring ourselves into compliance with the Federal Emergency Management Administration, FEMA's flood hazard requirements. As you may know, there's a nationwide flood insurance program in the United States. And what that requires a lot of is consistency. We have to have consistent rules for development across all jurisdictions. And that's a Herculean effort. And it's one that the rules get set by FEMA, who then in turn hands and delegates the compliance by the local governments to the state, each state. So in our case, the state Department of Land Conservation and Development developed a state model flood hazard ordinance in 2020. They released that in 2020 after working on it for maybe a year with a committee of folks, including FEMA. And all the jurisdictions in the state of Oregon are asked to comply with that, as well as Washington and all the other states in the United States. We have to comply with the state model flood hazard ordinance. It's been in place, as I mentioned, since 2020. Most of our other colleague agencies, partner agencies in the Gorge and in the state of Oregon have updated their codes to be compliant with this. We're finally getting to that, and I'm going to highlight a few of those changes. What I'll point out is that in some cases, our code was just using outdated language. It didn't really change the requirements as much as just brought the language into kind of uniformity with the requirements as they are described using federal and state language. So I'm going to give a couple of examples here in the next slides where you'll notice a change. And in this case, I think this is a change for the good. There is now, currently today, we don't have flood hazard standards that relate to accessory buildings or sheds. So I'm pointing now, my cursor is pointing to a shed, and outbuildings, that might be another name, or pertinent structures. The way the code reads today, it treats this building as a habitable building, just like it would if it were a residence where people are sleeping and conducting business. Habitable buildings have to meet certain requirements where they're elevated a certain number of feet above the flood hazard, the 100-year flood hazard elevation. And then they're also required to be constructed with certain flood-proofing materials. And what this new standard will put in place for property owners is the ability to have the recognition that accessory buildings are different. You won't conduct business in them, you won't sleep in them, so therefore the requirements aren't as stringent. And I think that will be a benefit to our commercial and residential property owners. The next one is having some regulations for floodways. We currently don't have standards for floodways. And so all development inside the 100-year flood plain is treated the same. And floodways are different animals in that floodways is actually, what is a floodway? It's the stream channel. It's the area where the water is rushing, especially in the case of a flood. You'd have the stream channel. That's where the water is. And that's the area that's carrying debris, projectiles, and that's the water that could erode stream banks and cause some damage. It's very rare that property owners are proposing things inside the channel, but there are, particularly for public property owners, like a state park, Oregon State Parks and Recreation, might propose a new dock, or might need to update a dock or a boat ramp, for instance. Those types of requirements then would be illustrated in this new section of the code. And it's that much more stringent. It requires some different standards that have to be certified by a professional engineer, as one might expect. You need to really be safe in these areas, because they're dangerous for the most part. So moving away from flood, I want to just mention one more thing related to the flood hazard. In the National Scenic Area Land Use and Development Ordinance, there are 2 different tracks for getting a land use permit. One is just the regular track, where one has to get a scenic area review or a conditional use permit, and those take a certain amount of time, and maybe longer than we might want. But there is also what's called an expedited review process. And our current code, as it related to floodplain development permits, didn't allow any of the proposals to go through this expedited track. And we have proposed this code to have an expedited track. So those uses that qualify as expedited in the zone itself could go through that process when applying for a floodplain development permit. And I think, again, that's a benefit to our property owners and those who might want to apply in the future. So moving on away from the flood hazard zone, another change that we made that really only has an impact on maybe 5 or 6 properties. We have a zone that's called public recreation zone. And it's mostly publicly owned, or there might be a property or two that are owned by the Union Pacific Railroad. But what we had done in the early 90s apparently is when we updated our code to be compliant with the National Scenic Area Management Plan, we said it was under a conditional use permit, properties that are zoned public recreation could get a conditional use permit to allow agricultural labor housing. And that's not a use that the management plan allows. So we've been out of compliance for many, many years. And so it's time to bring ourselves into compliance. Truth be told, I don't think any of the property owners in those that own properties with that zoning designation were proposing agricultural labor housing anyway. This does not impact any of those other zones that will continue to allow agricultural labor housing. I have those listed on the slide. A1, A2, F1, F3, those zones will still allow agricultural labor housing as a conditional use. So our process, what's our process been? We put all of this information on our website in March, and we also mailed out some project postcards that told property owners about this NSA Ludo, as well as the mapping amendments, which Kelly will be speaking to in a minute. And of course, the virtual open house, which we're holding right now. So in terms of next steps, we will have a planning commission hearing on May 14th from 3 to 5. And Board of County Commissioners will also hear this. The planning commissioners will make a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners, who will then have their own hearing on this matter on July 3rd at 9 a.m. And then there's a second reading that happens July 17th before the Board of County Commissioners. So it is a 2-step process with the Board of County Commissioners. If you're wanting to make comments before the board, I recommend that you attend the July 3rd meeting and the July 17th meeting, but make sure you make your comments on July 3rd. That's important. So you can have your comments heard at that first opportunity. So I also wanted to make note that our in-person meetings are going to be held in a different location for both the Planning Commission and the Board of County Commissioners. There's a newly acquired county building that's located on 3rd and Federal, 3rd and Laughlin, that half of the block. And it's formerly housed the Greater Oregon Behavioral Health. It's called the Gobi Building. Anyway, it's located at 401 East 3rd, and it will house a new Board of County Commissioner chambers. So there will be a new meeting room that will be available, and we believe will better serve our customers who are wanting to attend meetings in person. The building entrance is on Federal Street on the west side of the building. So parking is available on the street on Federal and 3rd. And there's also a small parking lot on the Laughlin Street side. Just walk around and get over to the Federal Street entrance, and that's where you'll enter to get into that meeting space. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. We don't have anyone who's attending this meeting right now, so I wanted to take this opportunity. I guess I want to pause first and find out if Kelly has any questions. I'll stop sharing here. Kelly has any comments before I move on to it? Just some Q&A of my own.
I'm not seeing any questions on Facebook yet, so feel free to go with some of the other questions that we have.
Okay. I wanted to share a screen again and show folks where, if I can get over here and do it, where people can find information on this project. So I wanted to share a screen so that you know how to find, make comments online. We have some tools that are available to you. So let me do that and I'll share a screen. So if you Google the Wasco County Planning, you just Google Wasco County Planning Department, it will bring you to a web page, which I'm going to share here now. All right, so you'll see this web page for the planning department, and you'll go over to this side panel, and it's under long range projects. So you'll go down this menu, and it says NSA map and Ludo revisions. So you'll click on that, and then scroll down. This portion right here describes this map project, which Kelly will describe in a minute. And then there's a side panel that describes the NSA Ludo update. And this is where folks could have registered to attend this virtual open house. There's a project summary that's right here that's available, that you can get a little bit of information there. That is basically what I've just shared with you. I'm going to get out of that. And then there is an opportunity here. There's a link called Read the Marked Up Draft. Click on that. It'll take you to this tool that we have, which I think is pretty cool, actually. It's an opportunity to really get into the weeds. You can get into the detail of what it is we're proposing. There's a summary that will show up on the screen first. It will summarize all of the updates that we're making. And if you scroll through that, you'll see the different categories, and you'll see the page numbers that are attached to each of these categories. So you can scroll through this document and get to those various page numbers and see what it is we've been doing and what it is we did. Okay, I'm just going to scroll to the end. All right, I'm going to click off of that summary for a minute. What you'll also find, this is the document itself. So you can scroll through here all 200 pages or 150 pages if you wish. And throughout the document are these clickable tabs, I guess, that you can, it will describe what each of these things are. These are called pins. That's what they're called. So what we're saying here is a pin has been added adjacent to each amendment, describing the reason for that amendment. So you get a little bit more information about each one, and you'll find these throughout the document. I'm going to find another one. There's another one right there. So this one will tell you we added some missing adoption dates that we didn't have in there previously. And so another thing that's available that's neat is if you get to a section, let's scroll down. If you get to a section, let's just pretend for a section that for a minute that there was a, let me find one here. Or maybe I won't. Let's just pretend for a minute that there was an amendment on this page. You can hit this this bubble, and you can make comments right in the document. So there's a tool there that allows you to leave your comments. We are prompted at the staff level via email that you've submitted a comment, that allows you to make direct comments, ask questions, and so forth. So I wanted to share that so that you knew how to get the information. Another question that people might be asking is why now? Why are we making these amendments, and why now? It's timely for a variety of reasons. One is the other portion of the county, the Wasco County Land Use and Development Ordinance, is already enabled to use a hearings officer. We'd like to have some consistency with the addition of some new language in this package of amendments that will give us the ability to have a hearings officer as an authorized review authority for hearings in the National Scenic Area. We're also out of compliance in a few areas with the Columbia River Gorge National Scenic Area Management Plan, and we need to bring ourselves up to date. And lastly, and very importantly, we need to stay consistent with the floodplain requirements that are issued by the flood Federal Emergency Management Administration and the state of Oregon, so that we can have a really good, solid, consistent flood insurance program in Wasco County. And then the other amendments that we're proposing, not as timely, but they're important for readability. We want to make sure that our code is as friendly for customers as possible. So that's really what's behind all of this. Let me see what else. Are there any impacts to property owners? I think by and large, what I'll tell you is these are mandatory requirements. And there are no new requirements really. These are all things that the other agencies in the gorge area have had to comply with, and by and large, we're compliant with the National Scenic Management Plan. In a few areas, we're not, and so we're adding some language to become compliant. These aren't any changes that are voluntary on our part, and I would say they're not quite Scrivener's. Not all of these are Scrivener's errors or changes, but they're not significant enough that we felt that we needed to have an extra robust public process to have these go through. They don't require a committee to clean this up. So I think I've answered the question on how you can participate more. I'm happy to take any questions that you might have. On the last slide, I'll go ahead and put in the comments my email address so that you can email me if you wish to ask me any questions about this. You can also leave comments on the website, as I mentioned how to access that earlier. So thank you for your time, and I'm going to turn it over now to Kelly.
Thanks, Alice. Thanks for that comprehensive overview of what we have proposed to revise the National Scenic Area Land Use and Development Ordinance. As Alice shared, really the main purpose is to enable us to use a hearings officer, and that's for consistency with the rest of our program. But we also think it's going to be very beneficial, as the National Scenic Area does tend to have a higher litigation risk than the rest of the county, and we think having a professional reviewing body will really help to ensure consistency in application. As Alice also mentioned, we do have some floodplain regulations in conjunction with a map update that we will be hearing for the rest of the county later on this year. But because anything we do in the National Scenic Area has 4 steps of acknowledgement and approval. So it goes to the Planning Commission, the Board of County Commissioners, the Columbia River Gorge Commission, and then it goes all the way up to the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture. It takes a little bit longer for us to work that process. And so that's why we're starting this a little bit ahead of when we do the floodplain updates for the county. The map won't be in effect until we go through the broader county process. So really, we're just looking about making sure those rules are in compliance with the up-to-date FEMA regulations. We already have to implement them directly as written from federal law or statute, but this just makes it a lot more transparent to citizens, the actual rules that we're having to apply. So the other thing citizens may be interested to understand is correlated to a postcard that we sent that went out a few weeks ago. We did have a couple citizens go to the Columbia River Gorge Commission meeting on April 9th. They are hearing the matter again on May 14th. And I believe several commissioners, including our the governor appointee from Wasco County, Dr. Ashley Thompson, is going to be holding a Gorge Commission run open house to discuss the issue with citizens. So there are a couple opportunities to learn more about those map updates, but I wanted to be sure to address that if citizens are interested to understand really what that notice is about. So the first thing I'll say is the notice has on the front of the postcard very specific language that we are required by state law. The way we write it and the actual language is prescribed to us. So we recognize that it can feel a little scary to get language that talks about impacts to property values. But we also recognize that's a really good tool to help folks pay attention to what we're doing when we make adjustments. And then the back, the postcard, we also took the opportunity to raise awareness about these other Ludo updates. So I first want to say that language is prescribed by state. It doesn't necessarily mean that there will be impacts to your value or uses on your property, but it is something that we encourage all citizens to reach out to professional staff and really walk through this. The map updates are such that you really need a professional to look at it because it's a pretty complex issue. So normally we would provide some maps that you could kind of look at and figure out on your own. This is a situation where you really, really need the technical expertise of staff. So if you look at the website that we pointed you to, that it does give our office hours and how to reach professional staff. So I would continue to encourage citizens to reach out directly to our professional planning staff about your property concerns, because they'll be able to look at it and really walk you through what the changes are proposed on your property. So to give some background, the Gorge Commission did a management plan update in it started, I think, in about 2016 and then went all the way to 2020. And it was really, it's a federally required update process that they initiate. And as part of the process, the Columbia River Gorge Commission staff had identified there were some what they call clarifications needed on the map. And so specifically, they were targeting areas where the zones, what they call land use designations in the National Scenic Area. We think about it in zones, but same thing, but they call it land use designations. Those weren't flush in a lot of instances with property lines. So the result of that, in some instances, were to create double or triple zones on a parcel. Generally, split zone parcels are not ideal, but they do occur. And some are intentional, particularly if there's specific resources on a site. So it didn't eliminate all split zone parcels, but it did definitely look at ones that the Gorge Commission staff felt were erroneous because they weren't following property lines. So they went through the exercise of going through and cleaning all those up. And so most citizens who are impacted by what they call these clarifications will likely find favorable outcomes. But again, really encourage you to reach out directly to staff and find out on the parcel level what the issue is for you. So that we will be moving forward with the Planning Commission meeting on May 14th to adopt and then go before the board for final adoption so that we can actually use that map. Those maps were adopted by the Gorge Commission in 2020. They were transmitted to us in 2022. One of the things that our staff wasn't clear on at the time that they were going through these clarifications, that there was an added component to these clarifications, and specifically it had to do with deer and elk winter range. And why that is significant, there are two pieces to this that are significant. One, many of the properties in and around the Dalles and Mosier are, as far as Oregon is concerned, what's called a go below. So they were allowed in the 90s to go below the state exclusive farm use mandatory minimum parcel size of 80 acres to down to 40 acres. So many of these parcels are really small. And that's very, very typical for the development patterns in and around the Dalles and Mosier. And it's also because orchard crops are really high value. So you don't need as much land to really make have a commercially successful farm. And many of these areas were, I think, prior to 2020, considered to be deer and elk habitat. But in the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife's perspective, it was particularly problematic to have deer and elk inhabiting these orchard spaces. And so what they in practice had been doing was issuing grants to orchardists to put up fencing that would discourage migration of deer and elk through our orchards, and also just for any kind of settlement in those orchards. As a result of that, when we initiated a periodic review to update our comprehensive plan in the rest of the county, so outside the National Scenic Area, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife let us know that as part of that process, we needed to update the deer and elk maps. They had gone through the process to update maps statewide in 2012. And so we were already out of step with the 2012 maps, but we also looked at opportunities to improve the local mapping based on local knowledge. And part of that also in the county was to revise some regulations and offer more exemptions for agricultural activity. So there were some benefits to the county. The map did grow in portions of the county, but in and around the scenic area, particularly in and around the Dalles, it actually shrank. And where the issue arises is that the Gorge Commission staff was not aware of this tandem effort that Wasco County was conducting, and went directly to the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife's website to access data about the maps. And so they thought that was the current data, not being aware of this in tandem process that was going on, where we were actually revising those maps. And so what that had the impact of doing, staff in wanting to clean up these maps noted that many of the orchards in and around the Dalles and Mosier should have been labeled 80 acre standards because of a really specific provision in the management plan. And so they went ahead and modified those labels to reflect 80 acres. And we raised a concern about that because it diverged from the updated map that we had gone through the process of updating. So that's a really complicated, jargony answer. I recognize it is kind of complicated, nuanced stuff, but it's all to say that when we identified that there was this discrepancy with the deer and elk winter range, we opened up the conversation with the Gorge Commission to go ahead and go through the process of revision. And I understand it's not incredibly common sense to think these things take as much time as they do, but unfortunately they do. We had to have a lot of discussions about how to proceed with this type of amendment, and sort of figure out some of the nuances of that mapping conversation. So that's really what the conversation was about in April. Their process, the Columbia River Gorge Commission's process, is to do a 30-day proposal for what they call a plan amendment, because those map clarifications were adopted as part of the Gorge 2020 process. And so the hearing for the decision will happen on May 14th. Their meetings typically go from about 8 in the morning till about 2 or 3 in the afternoon. It will be posted on their website, and we'll share that information with the public on our landing page. We assume it will go through, so we assume we will be on the road for those corrections. And then, as I mentioned, it has to go to the Secretary of Agriculture for approval, and that can take up to a year. So that's why we've bifurcated the mapping adoption process to move forward with the clarification piece immediately, so citizens, property owners can benefit from those changes. And then this labeling issue, because we haven't updated our labels, we won't be able to formally make any changes, but again, we haven't updated the map yet. So there shouldn't be any negative impact to property owners. We're just really going in and trying to clean up what is obviously an error. So again, really complicated process to say. This is really just to clean up, to protect our orchardists' ability to maintain that 40-acre standard. So May 14th is our scheduled planning commission hearing to hear the land use and development ordinance updates. And then again, the planning commission will also hear the map updates, not the labeling issues for the deer and elk habitat, but just the clarifications with the land use designations or the zoning and how it relates to properties. So we anticipate that being a relatively short and easy meeting, but we do really want to strongly encourage citizens to get involved, to reach out to us. If you haven't had the opportunity to speak to one of our amazing staff to understand impacts to your individual property, strongly encourage you to do that. We've already talked to a lot of citizens, and I think really been able to help explain and demonstrate what the proposed impacts are. And I think it generally set most people's minds at ease, which is really wonderful. We love when we have the opportunity to do that, but also it's an opportunity to educate what we're doing and how we think about these things and what the procedures are. But love to hear your comments, love to hear your feedback. Alice has gone through the draft for the ordinance updates to highlight all the things that are optional. So that's a really good area if you don't have a lot of time to focus your energy and attention on giving us comments and feedback on those optional updates, the things that we have some opportunity to modify. As Alice mentioned, a lot of things are really compliance driven where it's a requirement. So there is an opportunity for us to make any changes, but to come into compliance. But or just generally, if you have comments or questions or feedback, we really want to make ourselves available as much as possible to demystify these processes, make these things really clear to citizens, and help support you just generally in everything that you're interested in pursuing with your property to be successful and have a happy and healthy life. I'm going to check over here. I don't see any questions coming in from Facebook at this time. So we have a couple minutes. Anything else, Alice, you wanted to touch on tonight? You were on mute, but I think I read your lips and said, no, I don't have anything else.
No, I don't have anything to add.
Our esteemed Commissioner Heggie has been quiet in the background, and he told us he was going to be quiet in the background, but if he has any comments, maybe he wants to sneak them in chat. Otherwise, I will just take the opportunity to also tell citizens about other things that we have going on in the planning department and what you can expect to see from us in 2024 and 2025. Some things that impact the scenic area and some things that don't. So as we mentioned, floodplain is top of mind for us. We're moving through these ordinance updates for the national, thank you, Commissioner, for the national scenic area. Right now, we're trying to get ahead of that because, again, those rules take a little bit of extra time to get all the way up to the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture. We'll be going through the map updates and also the regulations in the county. So same thing, making sure they're consistent with the model code. We're going to be doing that likely in the fall to winter of this year. So citizens can look for that opportunity. National Scenic Area residents, you would have also received the same notices if you're impacted by any modifications to the map. And the appeal period is passed. So we're just really waiting for feedback from FEMA about that. But we welcome any questions or feedback as we wait. We're also going to be going through some updates to our geological hazard or landslide overlay zone. So in addition to the FEMA floodplain work, we're really working to make some significant changes to hazards. We know hazards are top of mind for citizens, and we want to make sure we're addressing that in a thoughtfully effective manner. Speaking of hazards, our wonderful team is also working on an update to the natural hazards mitigation plan, and hopefully you got an opportunity to participate in our survey or attend our disasters movie marathon that we had I think last month. It was a lot of fun. So we're going to have a fresh update on natural hazards. It includes a steering committee ranks the hazards, and then we develop action items. And the really exciting thing is a 5-year plan that we work on. The really exciting thing is we actually got a lot accomplished the last 5 years. So we have to develop a lot of new action items. And that's a great way for citizens to participate and tell us what they're concerned about and how the types of actions they would like us to do to make improvements in their preparedness and mitigating risk from hazards. So we're really excited about that. That's underway now. We've got lots of information on the website on how to participate, and we welcome your feedback. We also today, Alice was before the Board of County Commissioners, making some small revisions to our community wildfire protection plan. And as we enter Wildfire Preparedness Month in May, we think it's a great opportunity to review that document, understand your individual risk, and think about preparedness and mitigation efforts. So that's creating defensible space around your property, having a go bag, registering for our Wasco County alert system. We hope we won't have to do evacuations, but we want to make sure that we're prepared in the case that we do. So really great information with respect to wildfire. And it's a good way for citizens to know what the planning department thinks about and what we're working on with respect to wildfire. As I know, I've had the pleasure of speaking to a lot of residents, and I know it's top of mind for them. So I think that's a great project to look into, and we're really thrilled with the level of participation that we have among our fire professional folks. Alice and I will also be kicking off here in a few months some sneak previews about housing work that we'll be doing in 2025. We have some legislative priorities that we need to address with housing, but also a lot of cool, fun things with housing that we're going to be doing. We're going to be taking a look at accessory dwelling units and rural residential lands. And we're going to be taking a look at single-wide mobile homes, eventually having a conversation, countywide conversation to include the National Scenic Area on short-term rentals and how to potentially make an easy permitting process for that, or whether we even want to wade into that. So that should be a great conversation. And again, we're looking to start that conversation in a few months as we've been working in the background on the analytics of that. And then we'll be looking to go through the actual formal hearings process sometime next year. Alice has also been working really diligently on a revision to our transportation systems plan. So we hope to have good, positive feedback to report about that coming up soon. And anticipate more work with natural hazards. We also just wrapped up a really exciting pilot project to inventory and then assess local roads of public access. So it was about 120 miles of county roads, local roads of public access in county, so not quite county roads. And then take a look at the road conditions, but also all the brush and things surrounding the roads to really identify areas that would be appropriate for mitigation efforts, really thinking about fire risk and other types of risk. And so we're working on the assessment phase. A lot of that information, we're so excited. We actually got to upload to Google Maps. So we have that 360 looks at many of these local roads of public access that Google was never going to drive, but now citizens and our fire folks have access to that data. So that's really exciting. The hope of the pilot program is that it's successful and it's a sustainable model that we can then conduct countywide at some point in time. So we're really, really excited. We think this type of information is the wave of the future and really helps give us quality information to make these decisions about hazard mitigation. Next year, we will also be looking at some slight modifications to our fire safety standards out in the county, not in the National Scenic Area, but in the county. And again, a lot of these efforts that we're undertaking with respect to hazards will inform those efforts. And so at any time, we welcome citizen feedback and input. It's really, really helpful to hear from you. continuously. So even if you've told us a few years ago, hearing from you is really helpful in making sure we're on the right track, because our priority is helping you achieve your dreams, helping you live a healthy, happy, safe life with your friends and your family. And so any of the plans that we make, we want to make sure that they really help to achieve those goals for you. I think that sort of is my stump promotion speech for all the exciting things that we have underway in the Wasco County Planning Department. Alice, can you think of anything else you'd like to share?
I think you covered it all.
Great. And I don't see any other comments. So we are going to keep post this Q&A to our YouTube page, so it'll be available to watch in the future. We'll have links on the project website. All of this information will be available to you. Again, the project website has the opportunity to provide comments, to ask questions, and we really look forward to hopefully seeing faces on May the 14th when we talk to the Planning Commission about this. But in the meantime, if you want to set up a conversation with Alice or one of our staff, we also really encourage you to reach out. And Alice, our information, our email addresses are available on the Wasco County website, or you can just search the planning pages. It's under long range and then NSA, Ludo, and map updates, and get our contact information there. And that's it for me, Alice. I'm going to turn it back over to you.
I think we're ready to adjourn if everyone else is in agreement.
I think so.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for your time and attention, and look forward to see your involvement in the future.
Yep. Thank you, everybody. And thank you again, Commissioner, for your attendance tonight. We appreciate it.
Thank you.